Hello everyone, today we're going to take another look at frequency tables, and we're going to create a frequency table with the raw data. So I have here a list of colors, red, blue, and green, and I'm going to create a frequency table with favorite color as one of the, as the title, and then the frequency. So there are a couple of ways that I can do this. One is to highlight my data, go over to data up here, and then hit one of these buttons. So it's going to sort it alphabetically or reverse alphabetically. So I'm going to sort it alphabetically, doesn't really matter. And so all my blues are together, all my greens are together, all my reds are together, and I can just count them and put them into my frequency table. So I have blue, I have green, I have red. I can go over and count and say, okay, I've got 4 blue, plug in a 4, count how many green, put that number in, count how many red. And depending on how many different things I have, that's not too bad. So that's one way I could do it. Another way is to use the COUNTIF formula in Excel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit equals, and then the word COUNTIF. You see I have a couple options here. I'm going to use the first one. It says counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. So what I do is I open parentheses, and then it says range. So that's going to be A2 to A16. I can either type it in the way that I just did, or I can click and drag. So you see they're highlighted, all of the colors, A2 colon A16, and then comma, and then criteria. So because I'm using a word, I'm going to put it in quotes. So I'm going to quote and then blue. So it's going to count all of the cells that have that word blue in it, and it's going to tell me how many there are. And there are 4. So I'll put it over here without the equal sign so that it's still here. So A2 to A16. And then it's really important that you use the quotation mark, otherwise it won't count it. And then I can do the same thing with green. Equals COUNTIF A2 to A16. Oops, I accidentally hit enter. Comma, again in quotes, green. And it counts that there are 6 green. So again, I'll put it over here. That is what I actually put in. And then lastly, I'll do red, so COUNTIF A2 to A16, quotes red. I should have 15 altogether. I have A2 to A16, so that's 15 cells. And if you look 4, 6, and 5, I do have 15. So it did do all of them. Again, just to finish that off. I can do the same thing with the numbers. If I do a number, I don't need to put quotes in it, so I'm going to do that in a second. Okay, so if I want to do a frequency with words, you got to make sure that they're all typewritten the same way, so I don't have like a space in there at all or anything. You can just do, again, COUNTIF, and then the range, and then in quotes, the word that's in there. Okay. So another way to do it is with numbers. So I'm going to click onto a new sheet, and I'm going to do it with numbers. A lot of the time we get our data from something that's not Excel. So for instance, I have some data here in a Word document. So if you notice, all my numbers are separated by a comma and then a space. So if I want to put this into Excel, one way would just be to kind of split the screen and then just copy, okay, I have a 1, and then I have a 2, and then a 2, and then a 3, and a 3. That can get really messy, and it's easy to skip something or to accidentally do something twice. So I'm going to show you how to input something like this from Word or a internet, a web page, something like that, into Excel. So I'm going to copy it. And then in Excel, I'm going to use B1, and I'll show you why in a minute. So in B1, I'm going to paste it. And so all of my numbers are in the same cell. They're all contained in B1. That's not going to be helpful. So what I want to do is I want to, again, make sure I'm up here under Data. And then all the way over here under Data Tools, we're going to go to Text to Columns. And it splits a single column of text into multiple columns. So I'm going to click that, and then I have two options here. Either delimited, characters such as commas or tabs separate each field, or fields are aligned in columns with spaces between each field. So my characters are separated by commas, so I want to make sure that I'm clicking this top one. Okay. And then I'm going to click Next. And then it's already clicked off for me because I was using this earlier. But I'm going to click comma and space because both of those are separating my numbers, a comma and a space. And I'm going to make sure that treat consecutive delimiters as 1 is checked off. And if you notice, it's showing a preview. Each of my numbers are in their own columns. And you could also have them separated by a tab or a semicolon or something else too. Okay, but again, for here, and if you're in my class, most of your homework will be separated by a comma and a space. And then again, I want to check it off to treat consecutive ones as 1. Okay, so then I'm going to click Next. And then this is just what type of data is in my columns. I'm going to leave it as general. I'm not going to touch anything here. And I'm just going to hit Finish. And now I notice that all of my numbers are now in their own cells. And I can do things like count or the average or the median and things like that. I don't like having my data in columns. I like having it in one column in different rows. So I'm going to show you how to change it from that. So that's why I put it into B1. So I'm going to highlight all of my values, make sure I got them all. And I'm going to copy. And then back over in A1, I'm going to right click, and then I have options for pasting. I'm going to go to this one here that says transpose, and it's going to go from one row to one column. And if you look, it's already got them listed there. So transpose, it's going to put everything in the first column, multiple rows. And then I'm going to then also highlight, and delete them. Let me just try that again. So that I only have the ones that are now in a single column, because I like that better. You can leave them all in the first row, it doesn't really matter. But I prefer them as a column, so I'm showing you how to change that. Okay, so let's do it again just to make sure we fully understand. So I go to my data, I copy it, I put it into a single cell, and I paste. Now all my data is in B1. I'm going to go to Text to Columns, again under Data, Data Tools, Delimited, again not fixed width, but they are separated by commas. Next, comma and space are both checked off because again both of those are being used in this case, and treat consecutive ones as 1. And then again, I'm not touching anything here. I leave everything there that it is. Finish. Now it's all in their own cells, and I can copy it. And then over here, again, I would click paste as paste options, transpose. Okay. So now that we have them there, again, I'm going to delete the ones that are in the first row. And again, remember that when I copied and pasted, I pasted into B1 so that I could then transpose everything into column A. If you start everything in A1, you're not going to be able to paste it in A1 because A1's already full. So I pasted it into B1 so that my A column was still open. Okay, so now I've got my numbers here, and again, I want to create a frequency table. So number, frequency. You only want to do this if you have only a certain number of values, right? If you've got too many crazy ones or a lot of crazy decimals, then you really want to make a frequency table with classes versus actual values. So if we look at our data set, we've only got 1 through 5, so that's not too bad. So each of my class sizes will just be the single number. And then for frequency, I'll do count if. My range is now A1 through A20. Again, I could also just click and drag it. And then I want a 1. So again, if I'm doing a number, I don't need the quotes, just if I'm doing letters or words. And then I'll close it, whoops, close the parentheses. And it tells me that I had 5 1s. And this was count if A1 through A20, and I was counting the 1s. Excuse me. So now I want to know how many 2s I have. So equals count if A1 to A20 and 2. And I have 7. And also actually with numbers, I can even simplify this a little bit more. Instead of having to do this command each time, I could do count if my A1 through A20, comma, and then I can hit my cell number with the 3 in it. And if I hit enter, it will tell me how many 3s. And then I could click and drag this to do the rest of them, but I would have to be careful and first tell Excel that I'm not changing my A1 and A20. So what I do is I'm going to click inside this A1 and I'm going to click F4. And if I click F4, it's going to create $signs here. So this $sign A means that that's not changing. I'm not going to change column A. And the $1 means I'm not going to change the fact that it's row 1. So it's going to be column A, row 1, and it's being fixed. I'm going to do the same thing with A20. So the shortcut to this is hitting F4. So I'm not going to change my A1 to A20. That's going to be A1 through A20 no matter what, no matter how often I click and drag this. D4 is going to stay the way that it is because it is going to change. Okay, so A1 is fixed, A20 is fixed, that's the data, but the D4 is not going to be fixed. Okay, so again, I'm going to hit enter. It's a 5, and now I can go down to the bottom, click and drag this. And if I go to the 2, A1 through A20 again didn't change, but now it's looking at D5, which is a 4. So it's counting how many 4s I have, and there are 2 4s. Going down to 1, A1 through A20, again, still hasn't changed, that's fixed. D6 is what the value is now, though. It's counting how many D6s, which is 5, there are. And there is 1. And I can double check this by doing what I did last time, which is I'm going to highlight my row A, or my column A, and I'm going to make sure I'm still in data, and I'm going to hit the sorting value over here. A to Z becomes smallest to largest. So it's got all my 1s, all my 2s, all my 3s, and again my 2 4s, and my 1 single 5. So I checked that it is doing it correctly. So if I hadn't used the $signs here, if I had left it the way that it was originally, and then I clicked and dragged it, the numbers themselves didn't change, that's just because of the way that I had it set up again. But if I go into it, it's now doing A2 to A21 versus the A1 to A20. And if I go to the last one here, it's doing A3 to A22. So that also changed the columns there. But again, I don't want that to happen. I want it to be A1 through A20 every time, which is why when I go back up here, again, I want it to stay fixed, so I'm going to hit that F4 button. If I hit the F4 button again, it just changes where the $signs are. So if I hit it a second time, it's just fixing the 20. And if I hit it another time, it's just fixing the A. And if I hit it again, it gets rid of it. And if I hit it again, it goes back to fixing both of them. So the F4 just runs through what things you're fixing. You're fixing the column and the row, you're fixing just the column, you're fixing just the row, you're not fixing anything, you're fixing both again. Okay, so if you don't want some of them to move, you'll put the $signs in front. Then we go back and again it's A1 through A20 every time. Okay, so there's just some shortcuts to making frequency tables if you've got some raw data. And again, you only want to do this with numbers if you don't have too many different values. If you've got a lot of values, you want to use that histogram that we talked about before, and that will give the ranges of values versus one actual number at a time. Okay, so hopefully this helps. This will make some things a lot faster. So good luck.